It is the book of Enoch, beginning at chapter 73. It says, "And after this I saw another law dealing with the smaller luminary, which is named the moon. And her circumference is like the circumference of the heaven, and her chariot in which she rides is driven by the wind. And light is given to her in definite measure, and her rising and setting changes every month. And her days are like the days of the sun. And when her light is uniform or full, it amounts to the 7th part of the light of the sun. And thus she rises, and her first phase in the east comes forth on the 13th morning. And on that day she becomes visible, and constitutes for you the first phase of the moon on the 30th day, together with the sun in the portal where the sun rises. And the 1/2 of her goes forth by a 7th part, and the whole circumference is empty, without light, with the exception of 1/7 part of it, and the 14th part of her light. And when she receives 1/7 part of the half of her light amounts to 1/7 part and the half thereof. And she sets with the sun, and when the sun rises, the moon rises with him, and receives the half of 1 part of light. And in that night, in the beginning of her morning, in the commencement of the lunar day, the moon sets with the sun, and is invisible that night, with the 14th parts and the half of 1 of them. And she rises on that day with exactly a 7th part, and comes forth and recedes from the rising of the sun. And in her remaining days she becomes bright in the remaining 13 parts." Chapter 74. It says, "And I saw another course, a law for her, and how according to that law she performs her monthly revolution. And all these Uriel, the holy angel, who is the leader of them all, showed to me, and their positions, and I wrote down their positions as he showed them to me. And I wrote down their months as they were, and the appearance of their lights, till 15 days were accomplished. In single 7th parts she accomplishes all her light in the east, and in 7th parts accomplishes all her darkness in the west. And in certain months she alters her settings, and in certain months she pursues her own peculiar course. In 2 months the moon sets with the sun. In those 2 middle portals, the 3rd and the 4th, she goes forth for 7 days, and turns about, and returns again through the portal where the sun rises, and accomplishes all her light. And she recedes from the sun, and in 8 days enters the 6th portal from which the sun goes forth. And when the sun goes forth from the 4th portal, she goes forth 7 days, until she goes forth from the 5th, and turns back again in 7 days into the 4th portal, and accomplishes all her light. And she recedes and enters into the 1st portal in 8 days. And she returns again in 7 days in the 4th portal, in which the sun goes forth. And thus I saw their position, how the moons rose and the sun set in those days. And if 5 years were added, together the sun has an overplus of 30 days, and all the days which accrue to it, for one of those 5 years, when they are full, amount to 364 days. And the overplus of the sun and of the stars and of the moon falls behind the sun and stars to the number of 30 days. And the sun and the stars bring in all the year exactly, so that they do not advance or delay their position by a single day unto eternity, but complete the years with perfect justice in 364 days. In 3 years there are 1,092 days, and in 5 years 1,820 days, so that in 8 years there are 2,912 days. For the moon alone, the days amount in 3 years to 1,062 days, and in 5 years she falls 50 days behind the sun, to the sum of 1,770 days. There is 5 to be added, 1,062 days. And in 5 years there are 1,770 days, so that for the moon the days 6 in 8 years amount to 21,832 days. For in 8 years she falls behind to the amount of 80 days. All the days she falls behind in 8 years are 80, and the year is accurately completed in conformity with their world, stations and the stations of the sun, which rise from the portals through which the sun rises and sets, 30 days. All right. And so now you've read the book of Enoch, chapters 73 and 74. We're in book 3, and it's entitled Astronomy. Glad you're here. I'll get at you later.